There's always been a rivalry between the two biggest stock exchanges in the U.S., the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ market. With the newest wave of IPOs, however, the rivalry has been turned up a notch. In this morning's U.S. Bank Economic 360, U.S. Bank's Senior Vice President Mike Denneman joins Business Courier Market Engagement Director Kelly Snyder to discuss the chase by these two exchanges to land the hottest new stocks. Mike and Kelly.
Thanks, Peg. So, Mike, tell us about these two exchanges. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. That's probably a great place to start. These are, as Peg said, the two biggest exchanges in the U.S. So if you're a U.S. investor and you're trading stock, it's probably going through one of these two. And so the New York Stock Exchange is the one that we're probably most familiar with. We see it on TV. There's traders there on the floor. They're ringing the bell to start trading. It even sits there on Wall Street. So those terms are kind of almost interchangeable. And then the NASDAQ, on the other hand, is more the upstart of the two. Whereas the New York Exchange can trace its roots back more than 200 years, the NASDAQ's only been around since the early 70s. And it is not a physical exchange, it's a virtual one. There aren't traders on the floor, there's no Wall Street, it's just computers trading shares electronically. And so because of these differences, over time, certain stocks have gravitated towards one or the other. They kind of get the reputation for servicing specific types of stocks.
So each exchange focuses on a different type of stock, is that right?
Traditionally, that's been the perception. So stocks trade on specific exchanges, and over time you kind of get the perception that the New York Stock Exchange is the old traditional type companies, the venerable blue chips like Procter & Gamble and Coca-Cola. Whereas, again, the upstart NASDAQ really kind of came to prominence during the tech bubble. And, startup companies, hot tech stocks, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, you'll all find those on the NASDAQ. If you were a new startup with an IPO, you wanted to be on the NASDAQ, right? And so while historically that was probably true, that line starts to blur a little bit in recent years. If we think about some of the biggest IPOs in the last decade, Facebook, for instance, went the traditional tech route and went to the NASDAQ. But then others, more surprisingly, Twitter or Snapchat, for instance, they traded on Wall Street. So that line is blurred. IPOs aren't as predictable as they used to be, and so that's where this competition has really heated up.
Okay, so the new wave of stocks just plays right into that.
Precisely. It just, this competition that's there, it's kind of come to the forefront now. We've talked about the unicorns here in recent weeks and how these highly anticipated stocks are finally coming to market, and so these two are kind of battling it out to capture those stocks. And maybe to take just a quick step back, why does it even matter? And the answer is simply profits. Every time there's a trade, the exchange takes a little bit of a fee from each trade, and so if these are hot new stocks, they know there's going to be a lot of demand for them. You want that on your exchange so you can have it to be more profitable, right? So, most recently we saw Lyft come to market. They went with NASDAQ, probably no surprise there, but then Pinterest is lined up to come next. They've decided to go with the New York Stock Exchange. So that left just Uber out there. Everyone was watching to see which way they would go. They finally filed their paper on Thursday. They've elected to also go with the New York Stock Exchange. And so maybe a couple surprises there. Again, IPO is not as predictable as in the past, but here in the early part of 19, two of the big three have elected to head to Wall Street instead of the more tech-oriented NASDAQ.
Wow, that's really interesting.
There'll be more to come, so we'll see. They'll continue to battle it out, and we'll see which way the new ones go.
Sure, good. Well, thank you so much.